To date, we've learned how to get data into a table with SQL insert, how to change the data with update, and how to remove it with delete. We'll now turn our attention to SQL select, how we read data that's already there. There are three components: an SQL select script comprising select, comma-separated list of column names, the keyword from, and table name. There are other clauses which we'll come across later. Secondly, we use the MySQL query construct, which we've used before, just like in insert, etc., to actually run the SQL script. And finally, a new construct, MySQL fetch array, which puts the next row of data into an array or returns the value false if there's no next row. The array type parameter tells MySQL fetch array what type of array to use. I recommend that you use the keyword MySQL_ASOC unless you have a specific reason not to, as it'll make your code easier to understand, because this tells MySQL fetch array to use an associative array. You'll also see many websites and tutorials use MySQL fetch object instead of fetch array. There's no need for this in PHP database management, and it's often born of an obsession with using object-oriented constructs at the expense of clarity, which is not necessarily the best way to do things. For now, let's look at some examples. On a fresh code pane, paste the snippet examples SQL simple select, and save this not in the demo folder but in your dbwip folder as select_demo.php. This file has the first two usual components. It has some documentation that says what it is, what it does, and when it was written. We can collapse that. It has another component that tells us that it's going to connect to the database. Notice that because this is in the dbwip folder, we've got an extra up directory in the relative path for the dpconfig file. We can collapse that. And now inside our connection trap, we have an SQL select statement. It comprises select, comma-separated list of column names from the table tperson. We run the query with MySQL query. We set an index to 1, which actually has no bearing on what we're about to do. It's simply to provide a counter in our echo statement. And because we've chosen to get this array as an associative array, we can ascribe variables to the values of row with their associative index name. So we say while each row of the fetch array is not false and returns a row of values, set these variables to the row value of each of the column names. We can then echo a line terminated by a break that uses these to display the data on a browser. We then use the construct MySQL free result with the name of the query that we ran to start with. That simply frees up memory on the server. Let's run this in a browser. Go to the index of dwwip, refresh it, and run the select demo. And we get the list of all of the people in our tperson file. Remember, the tperson file, apart from the ID, consisted of a salutation, a first name, a last name, and a company ID. So it's actually printed out. The index, which is not the tperson ID field, but simply the order in which these are printed out. Salutation, space, first name, space, last name, and then company ID in brackets. Let's look at that again. Salutation, first name, last name, company number or company ID in brackets.